This is the second part of my experiment when I cross-section all of my lights. If you haven't seen part 1 already, I recommend watching it first here. In this video I dissect Nanlite 240C, Zhyiun C100 and Amaran T2C, but I also compare them to the lights I've tested in part 1. I think the results are very interesting and surprising in some cases. The exposure of each shot is the same. It is S-Log3 ISO 3200 f4 25 frames per second and 180 degrees shutter angle. So I'm in my garden again and I'm trying to map a few other lights with my neck, but this time the setup is different. So the neck is vertical and then the lights are under the neck. This is quite easier to set up. So it took like only half an hour to set up. But the problem is that each time I change the light under the neck, I have to adjust the height. So the light is touching the edge of the neck. I use the level to level the neck, so it should be perpendicular to the light. And my first light is Nanlite 240C. And this setup is with the crate and diffusion and the softbox, of course. So I will switch off the key light, which is the lantern now, and I will record this on Sony, which is kinda in the center of the neck, and let's see how that looks. And then I will change. I'm mostly interested in my tubes. I haven't been able to check them last time because it started raining. It shouldn't rain today, I hope. So I will start from the Nanlite with, I think, 4 possible configurations and see what angle it produces. Kinda lame thing is that this stand does not move up and down. So I have to move up and down the neck, and actually it's almost the lowest position it could go. So, but it will still show the shape of the light, I guess. So let me record the shape on Sony, and I will then remove the crate, then remove the diffusion, then remove the softbox and see what shape this panel creates. I would probably skip Amaran P2C because it's not very powerful, and it's also kinda like a accent light, not a key light. So I'll probably skip it. But the most interesting topic for me today are the tubes, because I use tubes usually for my hair light, and I got 3 actually, but only 2 of them I can remotely control. So I will test only 2 of them. So let me record how this light looks like. Okay, so this is Nanlite 240C at 100%. I'm recording at f4, and okay, so I hope that focus is in. It is more or less in the center of the frame. So Nanlite 240C at 100% with the crate and one-stop diffusion, and of course there are bugs already in the light. So I will adjust the power slowly, and it is 80%, 60, 40, 20, 10 and 0. And again I would go up from 30, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 and 100%. And this is ISO 3200 f4. So this with the crate. Now I will remove the crate and see how it goes. Okay, now the crate is removed and the shape is different. Maybe there is a bit of the problem that that the bushes behind the neck are illuminated because half of the light is behind the neck and it illuminates the bushes, but I think you can still see the shape of the light. So if I move this 65%, 60, 40, 20, 10 and 0, and now I'm going up. So this is without the crate, and I think the shape is a bit different than before. It's definitely wider, and funny thing is that with this light the probably ray of light would be wider with the diffusion than without the diffusion, but we will see in a moment how we remove the diffusion. And plus is that with the softbox still touches the bottom of the neck, so I don't have to adjust the height. But when I remove the softbox, I would probably have to. I will see. Anyway, that's with just the diffusion and the softbox. Okay, now the diffusion is removed, and I think that actually the shape is narrower without the diffusion, because these diodes have a 60-degree lenses on them. So that's the look without the diffusion. I guess that's the look without the diffusion, and I guess that would be, it is much brighter. So I'm going down 90, 70, 60, 50, 40, 30, 20, 10 and 0, and now up without the diffusion, just the softbox on Nanlite 240C, 30%, 50%, 60, 70, 80, 90 and 100%. It's quite interesting shape, I guess. The panel is quite small, there is no diffusion, but it is very powerful, and there are already bugs, I think, dying on the surface of the panel, but I'm not sure it's hot enough to kill them. Anyway, I will remove the softbox and probably don't adjust the height, so you can see how the shape changes. Maybe that's a good idea. Let me see. Okay, now there is Nanlite without the softbox, and I think the spread is actually wider, but still, even though it is like maybe 10, so 4 inches below the neck, it does not illuminate the whole neck. So there is dark area on this and on the other side. So yeah, that panel definitely has a 60 degrees angle, which is quite useful even without the softbox. So I'm going down 90, 80, 70, 60, 50, 40, 30, 20, 10 and 0, and it's definitely much more powerful without the diffusion. Like even at 10% it is illuminating a lot of the neck area. 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 and 100. Nanlite 240C, very powerful panel with kinda interesting shape of the light. It is without the softbox, without the diffusion and a crate, and it is still cone-like shape. Very interesting. Okay, let me switch to tubes. It would take some time because I have to bring, I think, another stand. Okay, this is first of my tubes, and this one is kind of promising. It is now at 100% and without any modifier, but there is a built-in diffusion, so the shape is like that. There are some reflection in the lens, but I can't help it. So going down is 80%, 70, 60, 50, 40, 30, 20, 10, and 5, and 0. And I'm going up 5, interesting shape, 14, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, and 100. Motorbike or a car. So the bare, what is it? Tube. So bare tube is not that interesting, but this one actually have two interesting modifiers. So I will attach the modifiers and check them in a second. So now I have the barn doors on this light. I will try to adjust them in a second. Probably at 100% only. Guess so. Maybe I can adjust it from behind. Yeah, so I will try to adjust this. So that's fully open, and I'm slowly closing them on both sides, and I can actually close them like that, and I can see the shape to a degree back here, but I wonder actually how that looks like. So maybe I will just open it fully and adjust the brightness, and then maybe close it a bit. So I'm kind of blinded, but I'm adjusting 90, 80, 70, 60, 50, 40, 30, 20, and it is, I think, a bit different shape than before, even with the burners fully open, because there is the element of the burners which is fixed, so it limits a bit the spread of the light. And now I will close the burners like they are now perpendicular to each other, and I will trip in a second. And there is this strange shape because there is also this fixed part of the burners, but it's at 100%. I'm going down 90, 80, 70, 60, 50, 40, 30, 20, 10, and 0. But I think more interesting thing would be the grid actually on that light. So let me set up the grid, and the grid for this light is quite deep and also got plenty of cells, so that should cut the light really nice. Wow, this is definitely different than what I expected, and this is lately my go-to headlight. This grid is actually really nice. Now I cut the light completely. Of course there is some spill between the cells, but the shape of this light is really nice. And of course the problem is that the neck is pushing a bit on the grid, but that cone, that really thin cone of light, is a great setup for headlight. and I'm adjusting 90, 80, 70, 60, 50, 40, 30, 20, 10, 5 and 0. Very interesting shape, and this is one of the best crates I've seen so far on a tube. Really great shaping tool for this light. It is kinda mystery light, which will be revealed soon. But the most interesting for me is how this compares with Amaran T2C, because the T2C was because the T2C have been my go-to hair light, at least for the studio, and lately I'm using this one mostly. So this is with a grid which is attached to the barn doors, and it is actually a really deep grid. That's why it creates this cone shape. So I will now switch to Amaran T2C with a grid to compare them. Okay, this is Amaran T2C at 100% with a grid, and the problem is this light is not powerful enough to illuminate anything with this setup. So maybe I should change the ISO, but let me see first. I can see this with S-Log that this is actually wider angle than the other tube I've tested, but the spread seems to be smaller because it is much dimmer light. It's like 3 or 4 stops dimmer, something like that. So this is full power, and if I go down, it's 70%, 60, 50, 40, 30, it's almost non-existent, 20, 10. You cannot see any illumination on the, I can see in S-Log, but with the LUT there is no illumination on the actual neck. 30%, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 and 100%. So the angle on the camera monitor is wider than what I've seen on the other tube. But now I will remove the grid and check how this looks without the grid. Okay, so this is Amaran T2C without the grid, and it is actually visible, and the speed is really wide. That's why I'm mostly using this as a hair light with a grid, and in studio I'm using that at 40%. That is fine with S-Log, but here in the darkness it is not that bright, even though I'm using the second 95 ISO of my A7 IV. 50%, 40, 30, 20, 10 and less 5, and going up if I can, because new Amaran app is quite annoying. 10%, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 and 100%. I think that's totally different look than the other tube, because this tube is much less powerful than the other one, but it is nice to know the shape of light it produces. So I guess that's it for today. I wonder if I forgot any lights, but I hope not. I think I will skip P60C because it is not powerful enough, I think, and it doesn't matter that much. So yeah, just 3 lights today, but I was really interested in the tubes and I want to compare them to see what is really the difference between the shapes they produce.
So now the comparison of the different configs of the lights shown a moment ago and the lights from the first video. For me, the most interesting is Nanlite with diffusion and without the diffusion. The beam without the diffusion is much narrower because of 60-degree lenses on the diodes. Diffusion kinda nullifies the lenses and spreads the lights more. Interestingly, when comparing the light without the diffusion to the config with diffusion and crate, it seems that just the softbox gives narrower beam than the other config, which is kinda surprising. Light is brighter because there are no modifiers cutting the power, so the reach is bigger, but the angle seems to be narrower, which is very useful information. I guess the light might have more specularity to it without the diffusion, but the difference is not very noticeable. Bare light without the softbox has wider spread than with the softbox, no surprise here. And bare light compared to the softbox and diffusion has much more reach and less spread. Again, no surprise. Aputure 600D plus Lidon 150 versus Nanlite 240C with a softbox plus diffusion. No surprise here, Lidon 150 is much bigger with much more reach and much wider spread. 600D plus Lidon 3, here still 600D with the modifier seems to have more reach and wider beam, although the difference is not that big. Both 600D configs seem to have a hotspot in the middle, the long ray in the middle of cross-section, and this part seems to be brighter than the panel. This is the characteristic of the COB light with the softbox. Panels have much more unified light. 600D plus Lidon 150 compared to 240C with just a softbox shows how different these configs are. Nanlite does not have a spotlight in the middle and has much smaller spread. 600D plus Lidon 3 versus just softbox on 240C also shows how different the light spread is. 600D with softboxes versus no modifier 240C. Due to the hotspot in both 600D configs, it looks like the light beam has a reverse shape. Configs with the crate again are very different for COB with softboxes versus the panel. After all these comparisons, 240C might become my go-to small key light. Looks like light fall-off and lack of hotspot will create a more pleasing look than both 600D configs. Of course, when placed at the same distance, both 600D configs will create softer light because the light source will be bigger in relation to the subject. So keep this in mind. Then the comparison of 240C with Godox F600Bi. Both lights with softbox and just a diffusion. Surprisingly, it seems like the F600Bi has more output. In reality, 240C has a bigger output due to the lenses and more condensed beam, but on the cross-section this does not seem to be true. Compared with the grid, they again look much different, both the reach and the shape. Interesting is the comparison between F600Di with a custom 40 degrees grid and 240C with just the softbox. The comparison between the tubes is also interesting. Zhyiun C100 is much brighter than Amaran T2C. The spread of C100 seems to be actually narrower when compared with plus to EV adjusted T2C footage. So it seems that the C100 might be a better choice for a headlight than Amaran T2C. Although when used above 60% of power, the fans might be annoying for the sound guy. Bare tubes produce a similar shape of the light. C100 seems to be more or less 2 EV brighter. I also compared 600D with different reflectors and Fresnel in spot and float to the C100 with the crate. No surprise there that 600D is much brighter in every config, but it also seems it could be used as a headlight too. Actually, any COB with a tight beam. Although you have to remember that 600D light shape is funnel-like, while C100 is an oblong cone. I hope this video is helpful. That's it and cheers, mate!